If you know of Greg Hardy, then you're probably thinking of either that 6'5", 280-pound freak football star, the UFC fighter, or most recently, the big guy in the suit selling Spectrum at Walmart. Yeah, you're not going to want to miss this downfall because it is pretty bad. Greg Hardy grew up in a low-income trailer park in Tennessee with his single mother. And his mother couldn't afford proper clothing for Greg, so he wore around a lot of the same outfits that were very worn down, and at one point he was said to be living out of his locker at school. From the outside, this is a very sad story, but those who knew Greg in high school didn't have as much sympathy because Greg, simply put, he was a problem child. The one thing that gave those people around Greg the peace of mind that everything might end up working out was the fact that Greg Hardy was a three-sport athlete playing football, basketball, and track, and he didn't just play, but he contributed in a big way. He was an all-state honorable mention for basketball and helped carry the team to a state championship in football. When it came to academics and even practice, like Allen Iverson, he wasn't about it. He was notorious for skipping practice in high school, and in terms of all other responsibilities, Greg just had this assumption that as long as he was putting up numbers on the football field, he could get away with anything he wanted. And this was true to a certain point. Many great high school athletes tend to get away with a little bit more due to their athletic ability, but the problems don't always start to surface right away. And for Greg, when his problems did start to boil over, well, they would destroy him. His high school coach knew this and was concerned for Greg, but assumed as long as he had a successful college career and had a shot to go pro, everything with Greg would work itself out, especially once he could make some money. But unfortunately, this couldn't be any further from the truth. But at this point in Greg's story, things are looking up. He committed to Ole Miss, a Division I school in the SEC, the NCAA football conference that produces the most NFL athletes. If Greg could just continue to perform and not get himself in trouble, he was setting himself up for life-changing money for him and his mom. He was itching for that moment to give his mom a call saying, "Mama, I made it." Greg's freshman year at Ole Miss, he played both football and basketball, although he didn't play many minutes on the basketball team, so his sophomore year he decided to call it quits on basketball and focus solely on football. Defensive end would be his primary position that Greg would play, however, they would throw him in on offense at wide receiver. In his freshman and sophomore year, he had 3 receptions that all went for touchdowns. Imagine being a college defensive back trying to line up and defend a 6'4", 280-pound receiver. Sheesh. But come Greg's junior and senior year, they only played him on defense, and he combined for 13.5 sacks. Although those are still some impressive numbers, it was a drop-off from Greg's sophomore year where he recorded 10 sacks and 2 receiving touchdowns. He was suspended during the 2008 season for missing team meetings and got benched several times mid-game for losing focus. There's no doubt that Greg was an absolute maniac, but as long as the intangibles and the stats are there, the NFL's gonna want you. Greg was not one of the top prospects in the class, and in his scouting report, scouts took notice of his lack of effort and focus at times, saying he has good range when he decides to play hard, but his motor doesn't always run hard. Greg was drafted in the 2010 NFL Draft in the 6th round by the Carolina Panthers. This was the time for Greg to capitalize financially on his athletic talent and put himself in a position far better than the low-income trailer park where he first started. He came out in his rookie year and played in 15 games despite starting none. He was still able to start to stand out as a gem in his draft class. Now remember back when I said that as long as Greg is putting up numbers on the field, he felt like he could get away with just about anything. Well, it started coming out more and more as he started to get more recognition. In the following season, he recorded 11 sacks despite sustaining a broken thumb early in the season. Greg was starting to get the reputation of being a dirty player, and he was fined over $15,000 for a roughing the passer penalty on Robert Griffin III. Coming into year 3, he told reporters that he was going to get 50 sacks on the season. That was over double the NFL record of 22.5 held by Michael Strahan. He was far from his goal of 50 sacks, however, he did manage to record 15 sacks. He made his first Pro Bowl, and he was named to second team All-Pro. The Panthers were the #1 ranked defense all year, and their league-leading 60 sacks in 2013 was largely attributed to Greg Hardy. Following the season, he got ranked the 53rd best player on the NFL Top 100 list. Greg was getting better and better every year, and despite him saying he could get 50 sacks, flirting with the 22.5 sack record was not something out of the realm of possibility. However, he did manage to break the Carolina Panthers' single game record with 4 sacks in one game. Even better for Greg, he was set to become a free agent after his best season in the NFL. It couldn't get any more picture perfect for him to land a huge deal, especially with some of the NFL GMs salivating over pass rushers like Hardy, and they weren't afraid to give the owner a call saying, "We gotta sign Greg Hardy. He's about to be available, and oh, you still there? Make sure you subscribe to Brain Juice. I heard they drop fire videos every single week." When it came time for free agency, the Carolina Panthers did not want to get rid of Greg Hardy, so they placed a franchise tag on him, and just as everything was going well on the field and in the bank account, well, at least for now, he was dating Nicole Holder at the time, and Greg was known for getting jealous, and Nicole was allegedly the type of female that would play into Greg's jealousy, which made it a toxic relationship, and Greg knew he needed to get her out because they were living together. He actually kicked Nicole out of his house, but the two still remained seeing each other. It got to the point where Greg snapped on Nicole one night, and they were laying in bed, and he beat the out of her. He threw her into the bathroom, she hit the back of the shower wall and fell into the bathtub, where he then pulled her out by her hair, threatening her with firearms he had inside the house, strangled her with both of his hands, and she thought that she was going to die. She said Greg's pupils were tiny. I mean, he looked crazy. Greg was placed on probation for 18 months and placed on the commissioner's exempt list. When it came time for court, Nicole didn't show up. Who knows for sure, but Greg had deep pockets at this point, and it would just take some under-the-table compensation for Nicole not to show up for court, but we will never know for sure. Greg would go on to get the charges expunged from his record, but it was just a bad look when all the photos of Nicole's injuries were leaked the day after the charges were expunged. It just confirmed everything. Greg Hardy is not a good guy. But this is the NFL, and being a good guy can be a plus, but it does not help you get to opposing teams' quarterbacks. So, off-the-field issues, although concerning, he still got the attention of Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys, and they signed him to a one-year, $11.3 million deal. And of course, the team did face some criticism, but I will say, I figured it'd be either the Cowboys or the Raiders to pick him up if any teams in the NFL would. In his time with the Cowboys, well, Greg just didn't want it enough to be an NFL athlete, and it was starting to show. His production dropped off to 6 sacks in his year with the Cowboys, and he was known to party the entire season and, well, be back to his Greg Hardy self. In 2015, he was suspended for 10 games, which he appealed and got reduced to 4 for violating the NFL's personal conduct policy in relation to the domestic violence incident he was involved in. That same week, he was driving through Dallas in his Bentley and thought it would be a good idea to go through some flash floods, and he did not successfully do so, and he was forced to abandon his Bentley. Rough season for Greg, and the Cowboys chose not to re-sign Hardy after the season, and no teams were interested in picking him up, not even the Raiders. But thankfully, there was someone who Greg found to pick him up: the police. In September of 2016, he was arrested for cocaine possession, and this would be when Greg would decide to get into mixed martial arts. He didn't have any experience in MMA, which had many people saying it was too late for him to learn the skills in order to become a successful professional fighter. He made his amateur debut November 2017, where he defeated Joe Hawkins by knockout 32 seconds into the first round. A month later, he fought in his second amateur fight, where he would once again win by knockout in the first round, defeating Kenneth Woods. February 2018, Greg Hardy fought in his third and final amateur fight, where he knocked out Ryan Chester in 14 seconds into the first round. There was one person that Greg needed to be in good graces with at this point in his career, and that was Dana White. Greg needed Dana to give him an opportunity in the UFC, and in April 2018, Greg made his first professional debut at Dana White's Contender Series 9, where he fought former NFL player Austin Lane. Greg won by a signature first round knockout, and Dana White awarded him with a UFC contract. This was huge for Greg, as he would have the chance to rejuvenate his athletic career, and in the UFC, if he played his cards right, he had what it took to become a fan favorite. Greg would go on to win his next 2 fights, all in the first round. He made his Ultimate Fighting Championship promotional debut against Alan Crowder. He got another first round knockout, however, it was secured by an illegal knee to the head, and Greg Hardy got disqualified. He continued to fight in the UFC, and he ended with a 13-5 record. The excitement around Greg Hardy in the UFC dwindled when he started to lose some fights, and in his final fight in the UFC, which was on March 5th, 2022, he lost by technical knockout in round 1, and the UFC decided not to re-sign him. In June of 2022, he signed with the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, and he lost his first fight in the league to Josh Watson at the BKFC Knucklemania 3. Greg has relied on his body to this point to sustain his lifestyle, with making $25 million during his NFL and UFC career, with most of his earnings being made in the NFL. He also has been known to dabble in some cocaine and other drugs, which may be where a lot of his money ended up. You might be wondering why anyone's even counting Greg's pockets, and that's because he was spotted in a Texas Walmart working at Spectrum. Now, Greg claims he took the job to learn marketing to complement his graphic design background, and he is using the knowledge to eventually go and start his own business. I will say, so far, all we know is he is not a fan of the 9 to 5.
I don't know how the f y'all do this 9 to 5 shit, bro. I thought like I had it hard being a celebrity and shit. This is not what's up, boy. Who the f out here working from 9 to 5? I got mad respect for y'all, bro. I talked all that shit about how like, heckle me, man. Heckle me, because y'all job is hard. I'll be mad as every athlete, every basketball player, every football player, make all that goddamn money. Boy, go to a real job. That's real.